Hey, I'm Max, and here's how I went from knowing only 2D in Unity and absolutely nothing about 3D or Unreal Engine to being kinda good, I guess, at 3D modeling and using Unreal Engine, and all of that in only about 2 weeks. Story time! So at first I thought, Blender, 3D modeling can't be that hard. I mean, we live in 3D, we know how to make 3D things, right? Well, it was pretty hard. The thing that I underestimated the most was my lack of creative skills. Even if you know every tool that there is in Blender, every keybind, everything like that, if you cannot do proportions right or you don't know how to do an object, then you're not going to be able to do it. First, I started by learning the Blender interface and keybinds by watching a bunch of YouTube videos, knowing the basics like G to move, S to scale, E to extrude, things like that. It actually took me a lot of videos to understand them all, but I found one video that pretty much summed it up. And honestly, if I could have started with that video, I would have saved a lot of time. If you want to start using Blender, I would recommend starting with this video right here. Not only did it teach me tricks like pressing G twice to slide, or using a gradient on a single texture and scaling down the UV to pick a single color, but also with the examples that I could follow, it helped me get the hang of it. As I was watching the videos, I was taking notes on the keybinds and tricks like this that you can use. And then I simply started following different tutorials or even going off on an image or simply my memory and doing things. Because the best way to get better at something is just to do it. A lot of the skill comes from experience. Then I started practicing sculpting, texturing, rigging, animating. I started doing it with everything that was more easy at first. So for example, with rigging I started with a snake because it's just a line of bones and that's way easier, and there was a tutorial for it too, so I was able to follow that and it helped me a lot. I continued to practice Blender skills from time to time, doing whatever I would find on YouTube or that I wanted to do. But after a while I started getting bored and losing motivation because I wasn't doing anything useful. It's always hard to get started in something new because you always feel like you're wasting time because you're doing bad things that are never going to be used for a game or anything, but you have to do bad things to learn how to do good things. So to remotivate myself a little bit, I decided to start learning Unreal Engine and use my bad models to make a useless little game, hoping that at least I would make something with it and it would remotivate me. So I watched many tutorials like these to learn the basics on Unreal, and it actually worked at making me a little bit more motivated to keep going with Blender. Seeing my work come to life motivated me a lot, and taking a break from Blender to learn something else gave me a little time to cool down. Blender is huge and there's a lot of features, and trying to learn them all in a few days is not realistic. Even if I took notes, I had to take breaks because it was a lot of info. Once I got my motivation back for Blender, I decided to make a character. That was a bad idea. A character is a lot harder to do because you have to worry about the proportion and shape a lot more than other objects. Rigging and animating it is also a lot harder because you have to think about the weight of each bone and making natural movement. So my final result was not great and I didn't even try to rig it. But honestly, considering I had never opened Blender until about a week before, it wasn't too bad. I decided to go look for a tutorial to see what I did wrong and how to do it right. I found a tutorial by Sebastian to model, rig and animate a low poly character. I followed it and learned a lot of things. Now I felt like I was actually ready to get started working on my game. It might have been too early, but worst case scenario I'll just scrap everything. First step was to make a human character model. I knew this would take me a while because I wasn't great at Blender yet and I would have to sculpt every muscle and everything. I know other people already made decent ones and posted them for free, so don't mind if I just take inspiration from it. I rigged it like we did in the tutorial with Sebastian and started making basic animation and clothes using the shrink wrap modifier. I imported them into Unreal Engine to check if everything was working. I attached the clothes to the socket on the skeleton, and everything worked perfectly on the first try. Now that I knew how Unreal Engine worked, I went back to Blender to make my clothes correctly this time. However, I noticed that just sticking the clothes to the bones on the player wasn't going to work for everything. For example, the chest and legs deform when you perform some animation like running, so the clothes need to deform with them. I didn't know how to do that, so I searched and found that you need to set them as a child of the armature, so they would bend with it, and then transfer the weight of the player to them so they would bend the same way as the player, and export them as a skeleton mesh into Unreal. Then in Unreal, you set them up as a skeletal mesh and put them as a child of your player mesh and set their master pose to the player. Yeah, this took me only a few minutes to figure out. Then I added and fixed a few animations, I improved the models, and voila, our game is looking kinda good now. Finally, I followed the tutorial to set up the animation montage for the swings and the notify so we can do the attack combo. And I spent a little bit of time to try to add the root motion for when we attack and we're not moving, so it actually moves us. Voila, for about 2 weeks of learning, that's not too bad. I like making and animating in 3D a lot more than 2D, I feel like it's a lot more natural. And I like Unreal Engine a lot, so I will probably even switch my main platform from Unity to Unreal for my future games. And that might also switch up my content, but I barely have any subs, so it's not like anyone would care that much. I hope you enjoyed following me on this journey, and if you're thinking about doing it too, I hope I give you an idea of what to expect and maybe some good advice.